Hi everyone, welcome to another session of UNESCO Talks. I'm your host, Gabby Menezes, and today we're thrilled to have as our guest Dr. Jane Goodall. Dr. Goodall's research on chimpanzees in Tanzania changed our perception of animals, and we're going to talk to her about her experiences and also her message for young people today. Dr. Goodall, thank you so much for coming to chat with us. So one of your main discoveries was that chimpanzees use tools like humans, and this was a revelation at the time. How did that change your perception of chimpanzees and animals in general?
Well, to be truthful, I knew it was very exciting. I knew that it was thought that only humans used and made tools, but there was a very perspicacious psychologist, Wolfgang Kohler, and he studied a group of captive chimps, oddly enough, in Tenerife, the Canary Islands, and they had a huge enclosure, and he gave them all kinds of problems. Things like if there's a fruit out of reach, they could put 2 sticks together or even 3. They could do all kinds of amazing things. The scientists at the time, they said, oh, well, that's just because they're with humans, so human behavior is rubbed off. They're not really intelligent. But I wasn't surprised to see the chimps doing that. I was very excited because I hadn't expected to see it in the wild, but it didn't surprise me because I knew how intelligent they were.
And I've heard you speak some chimpanzee. Do they have a language like we do that's as complex as we do?
No, they have communication signals. Their calls mean different things. But what makes us different, I think, is that we can use our language to talk about the past, to make plans for the distant future. We can come together to discuss problems, people from different backgrounds. And I think that's what led to the explosive development of our intellect.
You talk about chimpanzees having relationships much like we do. They're social animals. Could you describe a story about yourself building a relationship with a chimpanzee?
Well, I was never trying to make real relationships with them. I wanted to know how they behave with each other in the wild. Nevertheless, in the very early days, the David Graybeard, the one who first lost his fear, and eventually he allowed me to actually follow him. At first I didn't try, I didn't want him to feel pushed, but then he didn't seem to mind. And on this occasion, he went through a tangle of vegetation with thorns, and of course I got caught up, and I thought, well, I've lost him, but it doesn't matter, I'll find him another day. When I got through, he was sitting, looking back, and it looked as though he was waiting for me. Maybe he was. So he was sitting, so I sat near him, and on the ground between us was the ripe red fruit of an oil palm, and chimps love them. So I picked it up and I held it out towards him, and he turned his face away. He didn't want it. So I put my hand closer. He turned around, he looked directly in my eyes. He reached out, he took the nut and dropped it, and then he very gently squeezed my fingers. That's how chimps reassure each other. And so in that moment, we communicated in a way that probably predated human words of touch and gesture. And he understood clearly that my motive in offering it to him was good, and I understood that he understood. And it was a very, very special moment.
I have a question that I think the women in our audience would be interested in. You became a scientist at a time when it was mainly the domain of men. Can you talk about the challenges that you faced, and maybe if you have any words of encouragement for the young women in our audience, that would be great.
Well, it's totally different for women today. When I began, there weren't even men out there studying. I mean, there were 3, but, so I wasn't competing with males in that world. And when I got to Africa, it was, you know, Tanzania was on the brink of becoming free of the British rule. And there was a certain resentment to white males, of course. But me, a young girl, they wanted to help. So it was a benefit, definite benefit. I think it was a benefit being with the chimps because women are naturally quieter and, you know, probably not such a threat to them. And then this is something that couldn't happen today. But when first I saw the tool using, and then the Geographic came in, and so they wanted a story, and I got on the cover. And I think a lot of scientists, male scientists, were jealous. And so there was this remark, well, she's only, you know, she's only getting on the cover because she's got nice legs. So if you said that today, you'd be sued, right? But
Yes.
back then, all I wanted was to be out with the chimps. And if I got into the Geographic cover and they gave me money because they liked my legs, thank you, legs. But for young girls today, hundreds of them, I mean, I'm saying hundreds from all around the world, have thanked me and said I gave them the courage to do what they're doing.
And for mothers in our audience, you speak a lot about your mother and how she really supported you. Could you tell us a bit about that and what it meant to you?
Well, I think having a supportive mother was probably the most important thing for me. I mean, I once took earthworms to bed with me because I was 1.5, I don't remember it. But, you know, so many mothers would go in and oh, how dare you do this? Don't you dare do it again. You put earth in your bed. And Mum she said, Jane, you were looking at them. You were so intent. I think perhaps you were wondering, how do they move without legs? And then very gently she said, I think we better take them in the garden because they might die here. So that was the kind of mother she was. And, you know, so she encouraged my desire to go to Africa when I was 10, when everybody else laughed at me and told me to have a dream that was realistic. And she just said, work hard, take advantage of opportunity. Basically, I'm sure you'll get there.
You seem to have a kind of innate desire to observe how animals work. Where does that fascination come from?
I was born with it. Mm-hmm. I was born with it, you know, and so it turns out chimps too, supportive mother makes all the difference. So you can be a very low-ranking female, okay? So your kid is going off playing with the child of a high-ranking female, and a squabble breaks out. So the low-ranking female will run to help her child, even though she knows she's going to be beaten up, because she may hit the child of the higher-ranking one, say, get off my kid. Now it turns out, because we're on to just started the 5th generation after 64 years, and we know that the male infants of supportive mothers tend to rise higher in the hierarchy, and it's a very hierarchical system. And the females of supportive mothers are better mothers.
I have a final question, which is a bit more of a global one. UNESCO has a mandate to support biodiversity, and we have programs that work with Indigenous communities to use their knowledge to help protect the environment. And I know that you're a big proponent of that. How can organizations like UNESCO, like your own organization, help Indigenous communities to do this?
Well, I think by, talking as much as possible about it, showing proof of the pudding's in the eating, show what you're doing, make people more aware of it, encourage other organizations to also work with Indigenous people, share the knowledge far and wide. This is what we've learned from Indigenous people. It was them, they taught us, and we should learn more from them.
Yes,
and,
I can.
Fortunately, we are beginning to.
Thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with us. We really appreciate it. And for those